Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. A couple of interesting things to tell you about, and then we're going to close out with some speaking stuff I've got coming up, which might be of interest depending on where you are in the world. So the first thing I want to tell you about is a new Microsoft Teams global hack. I think something like this has happened before previously. I can't really remember. Maybe it happens every year, but it's back around again. And this is a great opportunity to get involved in the Microsoft Teams community, strengthen your links with Microsoft technical staff, and it's also just good fun, and you might win prizes. So what is it? It is the idea that you can build things on top of Microsoft Teams, which hopefully you know about if you're already watching this or listening to it. You can build apps and solutions on top of Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft are running a global hackathon, a global hack. It's a virtual event that's running for 15 days from June the 1st to June the 15th. And the idea is that you register and then you build something that runs on Microsoft Teams, a Microsoft Teams app or service. And you submit it and they judge it. And you can get some help along the way. Even if you've never built anything on Teams before, you can use this hack as a way of just like figuring out how it works and what you might do. If you might be an experienced ISV and you can still like enter this, build something amazing and submit it for to see if you win. If you want to, there's a series of kind of events along the way, like introducing what you can do, helping like some design ideas, some ideas around boosting user engagement, getting people to use your application and stuff. There's a whole Ask the Expert session. And then there's some judging stuff afterwards. And the prizes are pretty cool. Let me share my screen real quick. So there's a whole blog post about it. And so the prizes include things like Xboxes, gift cards, a C64 retro computer. That's pretty cool. This sounds very interesting. It's also being run in collaboration with the European Collaboration Summit, which is cool. This is good. There's a video of Waldeck that you can watch if you want. Anyway, so if you are interested at all in this, go and register. You need to register. There's a register link right here. Go and register for that. It's a short link as well, actually. So you can go to aka.ms/hack-together-teams. So that's a good one. So if you do anything on Microsoft Teams apps, consider entering this either by yourself as a side project, with some friends, as an ISV, whatever you want to do. Even if you've never done anything on Teams, this is a great way to get started and kind of get learning and learn how the Microsoft Teams app story works. Okay, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Microsoft Graph. And maybe you use Microsoft Graph, or you want to use Microsoft Graph, but you're a Go developer and you wanted to access stuff from Microsoft Graph. It kind of makes sense, if you've got you're working inside an organization or you're an ISV servicing different organizations. There's a lot of good data in Microsoft Graph, and Graph is the place to go to action lots of things inside Microsoft 365 and give you a lot of access to kind of the data around apps and services inside Microsoft 365. And maybe you do this already in Go with, I don't know, like just kind of making your own abstraction around HTTP calls and stuff. Anyway, there is a new SDK that you can now use. Now, this is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, it's interesting if you use Go, but I don't use Go, so this isn't kind of wildly interesting for me because I'm not a Go developer, but I get it. If you are, I guess this would be pretty interesting. What's more interesting for me, and maybe more interesting for you if you're not a Go developer, is that this whole library, this whole SDK has been generated using Kayota. Now, we talked about Kayota ages ago when it first came out, and a couple of times since then. It's a code generator Microsoft built internally to look across all of the Microsoft Graph APIs and automagically generate SDKs. And why is this interesting? Two reasons. It allows SDKs to be built that probably wouldn't normally be built. Like this Go SDK would take a bunch of manual effort for somebody who really understood Go very well. And so why would you do that? Whereas with Kayota, like it just kind of falls out because you just tell Kayota how Go works, and then it will generate the code for Graph. But the bigger reason as well is that anything that's made with Kayota as like generated for the SDK, not just this one, but like let's say it's Kayota is used for creating the C# ones or the JavaScript ones or the Python ones or whatever ones they are. they're going to stay much more up to date than they have previously, because generating them is just going to be a case of just running the generator again. So they could run overnight and always be up to date with the latest version of what Microsoft Graph is doing. And that's really interesting, because so often we see new capabilities come to Microsoft Graph and the APIs, but then they don't come to the client-side SDKs for a long time, because it takes some human effort to put them in. If we can speed up that cycle using Kyoto, and make it so that new features arrive on Graph and then they're available kind of same day or like a couple of days time in via Kyoto, via the SDKs, and all the SDKs kind of are up to date at the same time, it's going to make our lives so much easier. I know we're kind of early days with Kyoto as well. I think there's probably some teething troubles as well with Kyoto, it's fair to say. That's going to happen when you make a code generator that wraps around an API. There's going to be some rough edges, and it's going to take some sort of manual nuance to kind of smooth some of those rough edges out. So that's going to happen. That just is really just going to mean that the stuff is going to get better and better over time. So it's not a reason not to use it. I think it's a reason to kind of go and look at it, investigate it, see if it's right for you right now. If it's not, that's fine, but just come back to it often, because it is changing. Some of the cool things that get covered in this blog post. So this blog post is just talking about the announcement of Go, the Go SDK, but it does go into a little bit of detail about authentication and how that works. And basically you have to worry less than you might have otherwise. You don't have to use the Azure Identity Library anymore, which is kind of cool. You can just use this abstraction that they built for Graph with a kind of a Graph helper. There's some Go code there. I don't think I've ever seen Go code before. I'm kind of just looking at it now, and it's not crazy. I can kind of think I see what it's doing. But anyway, really interesting. Also supports the beta endpoints as well. Blah, blah, blah. This is a massive big blog post. So if you're into Go and you want to use Graph, read this blog post in its entirety. Seems to support all of the kind of more advanced Graph functions as well. So this here is a whole explanation about batching, which is really interesting, because batching is kind of an advanced Graph thing that you can do. You can batch together multiple Graph requests into one call. It's covered by most of the SDKs. It's good to see it out of the box covered by the Go SDK. 100% that is not something that would happen if the Go SDK had been manually written. You just know it, don't you? This is really, really cool. I like this. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So loads and loads of details. So if the Go SDK, if Go is for you and you want to do stuff on Microsoft Graph, go check this out, because it's kind of interesting. And even if not, go have a look at it anyway, because it's interesting to see what Kyoto is doing, because Kyoto generated SDKs are coming everywhere. So it's kind of good to understand the richness, if you like, of what that looks like now. So very cool. All right, next thing to talk about. And this is definitely one of those things that will be a blog post this week. I just haven't got a chance to doing it. So you are getting the information kind of slightly before the people that read the blog posts, which is cool. And this is all about virtual appointments. So for a while now, you've been able to turn a Microsoft Teams meeting into a virtual appointment using a endpoint that's in the Microsoft Graph beta endpoints. So you get the coordinates of the meeting you've created back again, you take the ID, and then you do a /virtual appointment on the end, and you post that, and that creates the virtual appointment, gives you back the URL, which is I think a visit.teams.microsoft.com domain, and then you go from there. It's a big long string on the end, and it takes you straight to the meeting. And that's been in the beta endpoints for a while. Now, what's changed is that it's been promoted to 1.0, which is great. It means it's GA, means you can use it in production scenarios, but it has slightly changed its location and stuff, and it's just changed a little bit. So here is the new documentation page for it, and this, as you'll notice, it's in the v1.0 space. And so we've got get virtual appointment join link. So this will get a join web URL for a virtual appointment. So kind of very similar to how it was before. You take the online meeting ID and then the ID of that, and then you do a / get virtual appointment join web URL. That's the whole request. And you don't need to put any body in or anything like that. You just put that in straight as it is, and then you get a response back. So in some ways, this is a little bit simpler than the beta. I just want to call something out that's kind of interesting. I've just occurred to me. So this is an example of me not planning and just noticing something in the moment that I just want to check. So if you go back to the beta version, you'll see that there's now 2 versions. There's a deprecated version and the normal version. And if we just go down the deprecated version for a minute, no, I thought for some reason, hang on, let's just have a quick look. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you used to be able to do in the beta endpoint that you can't do in the V1, specifically when you create that virtual appointment. So when you turn a Teams meeting into a virtual appointment, in the beta endpoint, you used to be able to specify some additional kind of information. You used to be able to, it was basically metadata about the virtual appointment that you were creating. You could put in clients, like appointment client data, some client information. You could put in like name and phone number. You could put a link to some external system, like an ID, if you like, or URL to an external system, just to make it a little bit easier, to manage some of that stuff. And then you could update it, you could delete it, and do all that sort of stuff. You can't do any of that in the V1 endpoint. The V1 endpoint is just take this meeting, convert it into a virtual appointment, give me back the URL. That's all it is. So it is a little bit different as it's gone from beta to V1. It has changed slightly, or quite a lot actually. And so instead of having 4 different endpoints against the virtual appointment to create, read, update, and delete, you've now just got a single one, which is the get, in the V1 space. And actually interesting, if you go back to the beta, all of the create, read, update, delete are all deprecated. So they're all going away. It's not like they're going to come to V1 at some point, I don't think. I think it looks like the decision has been made that we're only going to do the go get a virtual appointment link for a particular Teams meeting. Okay, so that is kind of interesting and new. Like I say, I'm going to write it up this week, but you'll get an slightly early version of that. So if you're, again, it's kind of good news because it's gone into V1 now. That means it's kind of locked. It's going to be supported. It's not going to change. If you built stuff out on the beta, I mean, I guess this is the risk of building stuff on the beta, right? You've got all that knowledge of how it works. But as it's promoted from beta to V1, there's some work you'll probably need to do there, especially if you're kind of taking dependency on some of those things that have gone away. But mostly, like if you're just converting a Teams into a JoinWebUrl, then you can mostly just kind of fix up the code and carry on. Okay, I think that's all the kind of newsy stuff I want to tell you about. Just a couple of speaking things coming up that I do just want to let you know about. First one is happening this week. It's happening on Wednesday in the UK in Manchester. I'm going to be talking, it's a kind of a lightning session, so I'm going to talk for like 15 minutes with a couple of other MVPs as well. And we're talking about a range of different things, but it should be kind of fun and interesting. It is, I believe, at 1 p.m. In Manchester. You can find all the information at the UCX website, which I'll put a link in as well. Tickets are free, so you kind of no charge to show up. But I think it is only in person. And the other thing I just want to tell you about is this one, ESPC 23, European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Conference. That is coming up pretty soon as well. That is coming up not to say pretty soon, actually, towards the end of the year in November. Feels like pretty soon. Coming up towards the end of November in Amsterdam. But the reason for putting it in here as well, and I'll put this in the show notes, there is a code that you can use for 10% off. So if you use ESPC23 Teams Dev, all one word, again, I'll put it in the notes. If you're interested in this conference, go register you can get 10% off the registration, which is not nothing. So, all right, I think that's everything from me. Whirlwind week, and should be fun this week. Chance to say hello to people in Manchester as well, and sounds good. All right, everything from me. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you again next time.